Hello. Today, I thought it was time we give, at least me specifically, give some feedback on the Nodewar changes and just kind of the season starting and how things have been going and the changes and whether or not they're good, they're bad, optimal, etc. So I'm just going to be kind of all over the place with this video. Probably I didn't feel like writing a script because I just could not be asked. I'm not feeling super great. I've been like super sick the past couple of days, just out of my mind. So I'm just kind of off the wall here, so bear with me. But to just kind of kick things off, I want to say that the changes that have happened for Node Wars have been rather positive. I like the caps. I think that is a very good idea, and it's been something that's needed to happen for a while, because I think that for the most part, the entirety of BDO's issue is there are players that just don't want to or don't have the time to necessarily grind the gear in order to be competitive, right? And you would be surprised at the amount of players that are absolutely amazing at PvP and that have like mastered their class at such a level, and then they have like the world's worst gear. Like I trial a lot of people for Arsha on a regular basis, and the amount of people that I see that have no gear but surprisingly have pretty good thumbs is really rare. But when it does come about, it's kind of amazing, because you never hear of these type of people. They just come out of nowhere, really. And before, they didn't have any kind of way to get into a good guild, because gear score is usually a factor, especially back in, before the changes and everything. So the fact that now, lesser geared players can actually have a foothold in the competition now and not have to focus so much on gear, and they can grind casually while also making money from Node Wars, that is a very positive thing, because now they can PvP and actually make gains off of what they love doing and what they do make time for. So I really do think that PA putting in these optimal kind of cap changes are very good. I think the caps, honestly, if I'm being honest, it's just my opinion, probably not everybody else's and controversial to popular belief, but I think the cap should actually be lower. Even for T3, I think they should be much lower. I still think that classes are too one-shotty. I think there are classes that excel at just diving into a ball and deleting people still and being able to get out scot-free. And there's no way to really pressure certain classes, like Sage, for example. You can literally dive in with that class and just do like 2 abilities and like one-shot a whole ball. I'd say that's probably the most prevalent issue right now, at least specifically on console. Everyone's playing Succession Sage, and I mean that like literally you can go to any relevant Siege guild currently and they have at least 5 to 7 Sages in their guild. I've trialed, for Arsha specifically, I've trialed at least 13 Sages in the past, I think, 2 weeks. So that should tell you that it's kind of, flavor of the month for sure. Dracania is pretty good too. I don't think she's that much of an issue. I think it's a strong class, but I think people just don't know how to fight it yet, for the most part. But Sage really, in large scale, it's hard to counter that class because they can just be in and out so effectively, and then like the CCs are so consistent and the damage is consistent, and being able to pressure, from like flank positions, it's just a really solid class right now, and I'd classify it as like triple S tier. It's incredible. It probably needs some tuning, if I'm being completely honest, but I'm sure that'll come at some point in time once they decide to flip the meta to something else. But for the time being, that is kind of the state of like PvP, where everyone's kind of playing Fatima classes right now. Sage, Dracania, the usual, Archer, Ranger kind of meta. That's just what the meta is on console, because the game runs like it's horrible. FPS issues, FPS drops and everything. It's really bad. So a lot of people prefer to play range classes because they don't have to be up in the mix. And if you're a melee class, you're honestly kind of gimped for pretty heavily, because if you try and do any kind of fast-paced movement, your game just freezes and then you just turn to dust. That's like a really big problem for these like really fast, speedy classes that rely on such heavy movement, like Succession Ninja and even Awakened Ninjas struggle very heavily in large scale, because whenever they try and do any kind of that fancy, super fast, quick paced movement, game freezes for 1 second and all of a sudden, boom, nothing. Like, you're just dead, and it's as if all the effort you put into is just thrown away. But that's just one class, right? There's tons of others, like Warrior specifically too is pretty gimped as well, because it's a heavy like FPS class. The higher the FPS, the more damage it outputs. Not to mention, you know, just the movement to, you do one like charging thrust, bro, and you're just immediately like turned to dust because the game froze, and guess what, you died. So yeah, I don't know. Personally, like I said, I think the meta right now kind of sucks just for what it is. It's just ranged and fodder classes. It doesn't really encourage any kind of risk taking. It doesn't encourage any kind of real, you know, exploration of other classes and options. And again, I think that is also due to the console performance. Nobody wants to venture out and play another class that they may love, right? But then they can't play it at 100% because the game's gimped and, you know, your class sucks because of FPS. So I think we're kind of at an impasse when it comes to that situation, but you know, that it is what it is. Now back to the conversation about that I was talking about with caps, and I think they should be lower. As I said, I think there are classes right now that are just hitting so hard on those caps, and I don't think it's necessary. I like the idea that there are these assassin classes that can do really good damage, but I don't think that like if you dive into a ball, you should like kill somebody in 0.3 seconds. I don't think that should ever be a thing in the game. I don't think that should ever be something that is encouraged. I think that more boxing kind of style gameplay should be encouraged. Front lines should actually be front lines, and you know, these backline classes need to have, you know, ways to die like very easily. And that's kind of like the problem right now, is it feels like everything is just super damage meta, and there's no encouragement of tankiness. There's no encouragement of like these sort of frontliney classes with shields or anything like that. Shields are usually pretty strong anyway on caps, but like strikers and mystics, I think got hit really hard with caps, and I think they are struggling the most. They do a ton of damage, but their survivability has gone down immensely, and I think that has hurt the class in the large scale aspect personally. And you have to be incredibly good at the class in order to, you know, function well with it. And I don't know, that's sort of hit or miss for me because I don't really care too much for gauntlets like that. But I do think that if you want to play a gauntlet class, you might not have a whole lot of fun currently with the way the meta is, on top of the caps too. So I don't know, I think that DP should probably be up a little bit more, and the AP should be lowered again. I think everybody deserves to be tanky to some degree, minus the squishies that need to be squishy. Archers, rangers, etc. Those classes should be dying in like 2 to 3 hits, and the classes that have shields or that are supposed to be brawlers should have a bit more tankiness to them, and there should be some sort of, you know, like I said, encouraging of more just ball fighting. It shouldn't, like if you have a ball engagement, right, you know, just ball v ball, that should not be over in like 5 seconds. Like most engagements are literally over in a few seconds, and that's not gameplay for me, especially in a competitive environment for console specifically, because we don't have AOS or anything like that. So node wars and sieges are the competitive aspects of the game. The fact that it's usually over in a few seconds is not competitive at all, in my opinion. There's no risk taking, there's nothing. It's just dive in, whoever's just the better guild at diving wins, and that's not very fun to watch, and that's not fun to be a part of either. I would also like to take this time to address alliances, because I know this has been a huge topic for a while now among everybody for the most part, where some people like it, some people don't like it. Personally, I don't actually know where the community stands with alliances, because I hear a lot that people hate it. Even people that are a part of alliances, they say they hate it. Me personally, I also hate it, while also being a part of a Nodewar specific alliance. I don't care for it. I never cared for it. Even when I was in Electric a long time ago, I didn't like it then either. It was super annoying and it was obnoxious, dealing with other guilds that just want too much that they didn't deserve, or, you know, your guild kind of, you know, being sent as fodder. And it's just like so much politics, and it becomes this game of garbage. Like, I'm not playing Game of Thrones, I'm playing BDO, and it's becoming to the point where it's less about the fights and more about the reward. And this is the problem that I have currently right now, is that the entire community on console, I can't speak for PC because I don't, I don't play over there and I don't know what's going on. I don't really have too much communication with those guys. But for the most part on console, the specifics here are quite literally just forget everything, 0 fights, 0 effort to make fights, and everybody is just trying to zerg on a node and then just pass to their alliances to make sure they can secure their siege nodes, and then they secure a castle, and then they pay themselves out all the time. That has been the weirdest thing to me, because a lot of these guilds that are doing those alliances, these guilds used to be insane. Like, they used to be really, really good guilds, and they had great players, they had good strategies, they had amazing gameplay. And now, like, I honestly can't give any of them credit anymore. Like, I really can't. There's nothing that has impressed me over the past year of just dealing with alliances. A lot of these guilds have fallen off heavily, and I think that's why they enjoy the alliances, because I think they're self-aware that alone they don't have much to offer, and a lot of their members would probably leave. And that's a huge problem, because right now BDO is not encouraging players getting better, and it's not encouraging a positive PvP environment. It's actually creating this really toxic cesspool of nonsense where everyone is super just obsessed with this hatred level nonsense, where, you know, instead of, like I said this to another partner creator too, where it's like, we shouldn't be mortal enemies and we should be like rivals, right? Like rivals, you know, we kind of have like a back and forth whatever versus guilds, but I shouldn't have a distaste for you. I shouldn't hate you. I shouldn't dislike you. It should just be like, oh, I want to beat that guy. Like, I just want to beat him in a 1v1. I just want to take him out in a 1v1 in a guild. Like, that should be it. That should be where it ends. It should never go deeper than that. And unfortunately on console, it has gone deeper than that from everybody. Everybody hates everybody. Even people in their own guild, they don't even like their own guild. They don't even like their own guild leaders. They don't like the leaders that they have. They don't like the guild they're a part of. But the only thing that holds them together is hatred. And that shit has been bugging the hell out of me recently. At this point in time, I think the quote from I've quoted this before, by the way, but I feel like I have to reiterate it because I think it's a powerful quote, especially from a game developer's standpoint too. I watched a video called like how game designers protect the players from themselves, and the interesting thing was the quote from Soren Johnson and Sid Meier, which they're the ones that, you know, made Civilization, the whole game series, right? And the quote that I think spoke the most to me out of that entire video when I was watching it was, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. And that quote could not fit BDO's player base so much right now. Everybody's like, we all know BDO is like based around money and silver. Everybody knows that, right? And what the community tries to do is optimize the best way to make money, right? And that's fine. You know, you want to encourage exploration, right? That's sort of the idea here. You want to take risks. You want to take exploration processes and move it forward, things like that. But at the same time, you also want to give players freedom of choice to do what they want in the game that they paid for. You can't control everything, right? But when it's affecting the competitive aspect of the game, that's where we start to have an issue. The way I personally view it too, since there's not an official system on console specifically for alliances, like there's the war hero system on PC where, you know, you can register as like a war hero for other guilds. This usually remedies issues like being able to, what's the word here, like kind of help the guilds that have number issues. So like, for example, let's say you want to drop on like a, 50 man or something, right? And you only have maybe like 45 or 40, and you can assign like 10 war heroes, right, that want to merc for your guild. They can maintain themselves in their own guild and then also merc for others. That system, in theory, would be maybe helpful on console, but I think it would actually just make the problem worse, if I'm being completely fair with you. But my point in bringing that up is that like these systems on PC would not really fix issues, because I've heard people talk about the war hero system before, and I've heard people mention it to me, and it doesn't fix the issue, because the issues are right now that nobody wants to fight each other. Everyone wants to optimize the best way to make silver during PvP, and that's by forming these mega alliances where they rotate castles, rotate nodes between their guilds, and just kind of like starve the other guilds of content and like just participation. And again, I view that kind of as like an exploit. Like personally for me, like I'm probably alone in that opinion, but I view it as an exploit, because you're literally filtering a way to make yourself money without having to actually earn it and like do the proper approach and competition that was intended from Pearl Abyss. Pearl Abyss did not create this game in order for you to form these mega alliances in order for you to get paid yourself. Like that was never like said by anybody. Nobody's ever been like, hey yo, I want you guys to form these alliances. I want you guys to work together and then pay yourself out. and never fight anybody. Like nobody's doing that. Like no nobody's saying that at all. And like I said, I view it as an exploit. It's no different than like being in a Call of Duty lobby during the Modern Warfare like days where you would throw a tac insert down behind a fucking dumpster with your homie and then you guys would kill each other for fucking skins and kill streaks. Like it's literally the same thing. You're not playing the game how it's meant to be played. You're cheating in order to achieve something. And that's not how the game should be played. It's garbage. It's literally garbage. Everybody should be fighting everybody. And if there is going to be alliances, which personally, I don't think alliances are a bad thing. I want to make that perfectly clear. It's only a bad thing right now because it's not about fighting. It's about how you can make the most money by paying yourself out. It's not about like earning it. It's about figuring out how you can optimize the way to pay yourself. So if alliances were to exist, there has to be a reason for it to exist, whether it be, oh, that alliance right there, you know, they're causing us problems. Let's form our own alliance and go fight them. But that's not what's happening. Nobody's doing that. Everybody's just finding a region and then forcing people to sit on it. And that has been a huge issue. That has been a huge issue. And the only way to remedy that, right, is to take away the castles. And you'd have to only have one castle. But see, Pearl Abyss did that at one point. They took all the castles away, and then they took Serendy and Balenos included also, and then they brought it back, and it was just Calpheon. And the issue was on console, it ran so badly that it was unplayable. It was literally unplayable. You could not play the game at all during that. So they released Medaya and Valencia, which lessened the load because, you know, different servers and it wasn't as laggy. It still has its issues, right? Because you're dogpiling hundreds of players into a castle and trying to, you know, work that out. But like, again, how do we get these guilds to fight each other and to not pay themselves out? That's the question here. And personally, I don't have an answer. I don't know how to do that because it's a community problem. Like people just are worried about paying themselves versus having fun. And that goes back to the quote that I mentioned earlier from Sid Meier's, where people are just optimizing the fun out of the game. And as a designer, and this is just me saying that to PA, as designers and game developers, you have to consider that players are playing your game wrong. Like that is something that you should be looking at. And if you intended the game to be played this way, then just forget everything that I'm saying and I'll quit right now. But like, if you have any ounce of like just integrity with how you design your game and developed it, and if you can take a good look at console and what's going on over here, and you can straight face tell me this is how you intended us to play the game, I mean, I got nothing else to say at that point, you know what I'm saying? But to go ahead and just kind of like wrap the video up because it's gone on long enough, I will say that just in short, the changes for the Node Wars are great. I think being able to make money from PvP is really, really good. That's a very good, you know, step in the right direction. I think that the execution needs to be a bit tighter. I think there needs to be some adjustments because there are people that are looking to just exploit that in whatever way physically possible. And that needs to be taken a look at. And then as far as like the caps and everything, I think they're okay for now. I do think T3 caps should be a little bit lower, and that's where I'm at. I think the game should reward, you know, more skill than gear. I think that's a huge thing because as I mentioned before, you would be surprised how many people actually have 0 gear but have insane thumbs and actually are, you know, they're in the BA practicing combos, movement, etc. There's a ton of players out there that you've never even heard of that actually can, you know, make some moves, and I want to highlight those players. I want them to have a shot at the game without needing, you know, X amount of gear score. One thing actually I do want to bring up, because I kind of thought about this recently too, is that I think the caps for T3s, not the gear caps, but like the number caps, I think also there should be a little bit more variety in the numbers, because I see a lot of like 50s and 70s, right? Some guilds are not like, they're just not pulling that, and there's not enough guilds to go around to create competition as well. There's only so many guilds that can actually pull 50 plus to a Nodewar on a Monday, you know what I'm saying? So I think that the number cap for how many participants can actually be there, I think that could be lowered quite a bit, because that would also make it a little bit easier for certain 1vx scenarios. At least if you get teamed right, you know, dealing with, you know, 40 people versus, you know, fucking if 2 guilds bring 50, that's 100 people, versus like on a T3 You know, if you have like a 30, a 30 man or something on a T3, I only have to deal with 60 people. It's still shit, but you know, slightly less. So I do think that for T3s, I think that there should be some number variety there where, you know, instead of it being nothing but 50s and 70s, you could probably drop that. I'll throw in a sprinkle in there, a couple 35s, maybe, you know, 40s, something like that. I think that's a healthy option too. And yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, hopefully you guys can work on the alliances and creating fights. I think that's important, is just creating fights. If we can create a healthy environment where guilds can just fight and actually have fair fights and disencourage zerging or discourage zerging and things like that, I think that would be helpful. That would be a good idea. Open world is whatever, but when it comes to the actual competitive aspects, I think that needs to be taken into heavy consideration. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully you guys got something out of this, but yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Bye bye.